Well, you declared your candidacy for the Republican nomination. Now, realistically, do you think that you're going to get it? Because Trump was by far the obvious candidate for Republicans, considering what was happening. Or were you considering that maybe because of the court cases, he might get knocked out of the race?
None of the above. First of all, the court cases didn't exist when I declared for my candidacy.
Okay.
My premise was driven less by the tactics of horse race analysis. I think a lot of politicians do horse race analysis. I wasn't doing horse race analysis. What I asked myself was, how am I going to do my part to make sure my kids are able to grow up in a country that gives them the same opportunities that I had in this country? Right? At that point, I was 37 when I declared. I'm 38 now. I was 37 years old. I would have been the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president, having founded multi-billion-dollar companies, the kid of immigrants who came to this country with not a penny in their pocket, or not much more than a few dollars in their pocket, I'll say. And so, yes, how are we going to ensure that that country exists for our kids? And I got a great piece of advice along the way, which is, and it's true, it takes about as much effort to do something small and do it well as it does to take something really big and to do it well. And that's true. Right? If you're starting a small business down the street and you want to do a really good job of that and put your heart and soul into it, I think it will take about as much effort to do that at the best version of itself than it would be to successfully lead this country as president. It takes about as much effort to do those things. I mean, there's only so much effort you could put in as a human being. And so if you're going to do something small, you might as well do something big. Not to say that one of those is inherently more important than the other. Both are important in their own ways. But part of this was also then looking myself in the mirror and asking myself, what gifts has God given me? And I think everybody ought to do that exercise for themselves, a deep reflection. Look yourself in the mirror. Every one of us, the cameramen in this room, to you on the other side of this conversation, to me here, you got to ask ourselves, what is our own unique God-given gift? That's a hard thing to answer, right? It's a hard thing to figure out. Every one of us has our own unique gift, but when you figure out what that is, then the next question becomes easier, which is, how do I use those gifts to do what is right in the short time that we're given? And it is a short time that we're given. And so for me, what did I care about? I care about this country and the national identity of this country that I thought was missing. I grew up in a generation, are you millennial? I don't know. I'm looking at you now. You're Gen X.
I was born in 73. So
yeah, all right. Well, okay, you look a little younger than you are. All right, but regardless of what it is, I grew up in a generation, I think it's true of all of our generations, really, where we are lost for purpose and meaning. People in this country are going through their motions, looking at their iPhones, doing what their iPhones told them to do on a given day, lost out of sense of no location in a relationship to God or to country or to your family. What can I do as a fresh voice coming from outside of politics to lead and hopefully reunite and revive purpose in a country that's missing it? And somebody who can actually attest to the existence of the American dream because I've lived it, to actually recreate it in this country. That's what moved me to run for president. And if you ask me in my heart of heart, was I going to be the next president of the United States? The answer was yes, actually. Now, you may say that's delusional. And I got to say, probably it takes somebody who's got some loose screws in their head to run for U.S. president at all. Not just me. Anybody who does it seriously probably has some things that are wired a little bit differently that cause you to embark on an adventure like that. But I believed that we were going to succeed in the mission I set out to achieve. The beauty of this country is the people get to decide that. That's not up to me. And in some deeper sense, I think it's up to God, right? God lays out the path and we're his instruments and we follow it. But what I'm trying to do now is, rather than go back to horse race analysis, because people ask me, vice president or governor or secretary of this or cabinet post that. Don't make it about your own horse race, but understand what your purpose is, have a good understanding of what skills God has given you and what skills he hasn't, and how you're going to use those skills. And so that's kind of what I'm going through now. And it's the process that led me to run for president in the first place, too.
Well, I mean, the fact that you were a billionaire, you use your own funds to actually run.
Yeah, very different.
How much money did you spend? I mean, it almost kind of reminds me of a Ross Perot situation.
Yeah. I spent over $30 million running for U.S. president.
$30 million of your own money.
Yeah, over 30 million.
Okay. And you ended up ending your campaign after the Iowa
I get the exact number for you, 30 point something, but whatever. Let's call it rough numbers, 30 million. Yeah.
Right. So after the Iowa caucus, you ended your campaign after it was clear that Trump was going to be the, Republican nominee. How did it feel when you finally said, okay, this isn't going to happen?
It was, if I was to give myself advice, I'm not sure I could have done this, but at least plan the exit a little bit better, have that contingency plan. We didn't have that contingency plan. I thought we were actually going to do a lot better in terms of the vote tally at the Iowa caucus than we did. We got close to 8%. I was also on track to get about 8% in New Hampshire, which came a week later. At that point, I decided to say, all right, I want to throw that 8% in the direction of the person who I was going to support so that New Hampshire didn't turn out as an artificially close race at that point between one candidate who I think should be the nominee and another candidate who I thought should not. But was I surprised? Yeah, I really was. I think we were tracking to do better because one of the things we noticed on the ground in Iowa was there was a lot more energy behind my campaign than pretty much the other candidates except for Donald Trump. But the energy on the ground was palpable. We get independents, people who've never been in politics, young people, grassroots Republicans, conservatives, even some one-time Democrats that said that they actually wanted to see somebody with independent ideas in the White House. All kinds of people, tons of energy at our events, more than any other candidate. Just the raw energy on the ground was biggest for me. Here's what we discovered. First of all, there was blizzards, and it was one of the coldest and most weather catastrophe Iowa caucuses ever. But that's a smaller point. The bigger point is the best predictor of whether somebody actually shows up at the Iowa caucus is if they've done the Iowa caucus before. And it's not like you show up and you just vote at the Iowa caucus. It's a whole meeting. It's an interesting and very different process. You take a meeting in a local school gymnasium. It's a whole process. You got to reserve, that evening. That's how you spend that evening. And this is on a Monday night of MLK Day weekend. Many colleges were still on break or had not come back. So a lot of the places where I was deriving the most energy, if you're looking at overall energy behind the campaign, hands down, number 2 to Trump. If you look at actually if you took Donald Trump out of it and look at who the second choice voters were, I was number 1 amongst the rest of the pack. But that, I think, gave me a sense of optimism about what the result was going to be. But when the actual results came down, it was just shy of 8% in the Iowa caucus. Now, I'm proud as a guy for our achievement as a campaign and the team that helped me achieve it. Look, you had a former vice president of the United States, multiple U.S. senators, multiple sitting governors, all of whom were well under that, most of whom were under 1% or didn't even get to that Iowa caucus. And 8x their support at the Iowa caucus with only 3 candidates who were ahead of me. But I actually thought that we were going to over-deliver that by a lot. So I did not have a plan B. Never been a plan B guy. So the Iowa caucus, we're there that night. I'm looking at whether the numbers are coming in where I expected them to come in, and then we look in and we're seeing 8%. We did have a second home. I told you we didn't have a second. We did have a second home. It was an apartment that we rented in Des Moines. So 6-month apartment rental in Des Moines in the middle of winter was the closest thing we've had to a second home as a family. My wife made immense sacrifice as well. She took 2 weeks off work. She's a surgeon. She saves and improves lives on a daily basis. She took the first 2 weeks of January off to be with me braving the blizzards and everything else in Iowa. And we had a level-setting conversation. So there's a bunch of chaos that night. Our victory party is playing out. The press is all gaggled there. We come back to the apartment. We ask everybody else to leave. And we just go to, first we're sitting there and they said, both of us were like, I think I want to be horizontal for a little bit. We both lie on the bed and just sit there quietly for probably about 15 minutes. Neither of us said a word and we're just processing it. And it was difficult because we had a flight that night. We're going to do the victory party. We're going to get on my plane, go to New Hampshire. What we're going to do is we're going to drop off my wife in Columbus because she had taken 2 weeks off. I told her I was going to do New Hampshire for the next few days myself. She could catch up on a lot of the work that she had missed and then join me with the kids a few days later. That was the plan. And we say, actually, we might do things a little differently right now. Do we have a plan to win? So my first steps back to, all right, how are we going to be scrappy in New Hampshire, be able to make up for lost ground? That was what we went to next. And then we said, do we actually believe the truth of this? Right? Because I told you at that point, the whole race, I'm guided by My heart told me that we were in this to achieve the mission we set out to achieve. And when my heart first awakened by the facts in front of us said that that wasn't going to be the case, we said, all right, what's the next best way we're going to achieve the mission we want to for this country, but maybe in a little bit of a different way? And so in about half an hour, completely changed course and, took the course that the public saw afterwards. And so that's the way that played out.